I'm not sure what happened, but my screen just reintroduced me. I'm not sure if we've gotten the earlier part of what I have shared, but I am a witch. First, my uh, spell crafting started at 11 years old when I was being bullied by a girl whose name will withhold. Um, but I didn't know that which was a thing I could be until I went away to college at around 16 years old. I left home early. Um, but the community I started out in was the Dianic community. I had a lot of uh, trouble sorting out how I felt and thought about the divine masculine. But the divine feminine was a bath of warm water to be in after being subjugated as well to Christianity as was imposed upon me by society, family members, etc. Um, I will say that my activism started around the same time that I found my witchliness. The first time I got arrested for my political act was during that there was a explosion. So we're just going to have to keep one eye on the news banner and one eye on our global Congress. So my political activism, the Rodney King verdict was when, and it's often referred to as the LA riots, which is insulting because it was a national event and there were national protests. And I wish we had had the technology then that we do now so we could have did our human allies to be present at that very like all I can see is flame and fire and just the feeling, the burning of passion and enlightenment, because isn't that what the elements of fire is? It's both warmth, which implies movement right down to the molecular level, as as also illumination and epiphany. All things fire were happening, especially for me, because me at 18 was definitely someone whose judgment was not as well developed as it is now. Um, but I realized that my place was in advocacy. And in the beginning, I was an advocate for children's rights. I was an advocate for women's issues, the divine feminine. And then I realized that our people, pagan people, witch people, had no advocates per se. We individuals who um, did work around being published and being the face of witchcraft and paganism, um, and the list of those folk is a long one. Um, Margot Adler and Starhawk and of course Uncle Gerald and Auntie Doreen. You know who I'm talking about. But my advocacy paired up with my spirituality in such a way that I found myself really exploring the ways in which our culture as pagan people, our lore, our practices, our beliefs. I mean, once upon a time, if you wanted an altar tool, you went to the back of an Azure Green catalog. Yep, you had to actually read the paper catalog, and you fill out the back form that says, I want this AFME, and you added your $20 and shipped it off, and then you hoped that you would get your all. But it's a different day and age, and not only are tools available, but other practitioners are available on a global scale, and navigating the digital world of paganism and witchcraftian practice is daunting, but it can be done. It is absolutely necessary, and we need to find our proficiency and develop that proficiency into fluency with technology, because here shortly we will need to have, resources and texts and artifacts, as much of it that can be digitized. We need to do that, but also handwriting, our notes, our practices, our grimoire, or at least printing them off if they are something that is on your laptop or in the cloud. Thank God that, I am, or the Gen X generation was able to have a foot in each world, the brick and mortar world, as well as the click world of the internet age and the cloud and digital storage, because we're going to need to protect what we have in terms of our holy texts if we have them. Like I said, art pieces, uh, vintage, first edition, going to need to have those in both a physical capacity. It's worth mentioning that the single largest cache of pagan texts, scrolls, artifacts, reliquary is held by the Vatican. Yes, that enrages me, but we find ourselves now in a time of very self-directed, speaking on our own behalf, as we should. So let's get to what happened for me in terms of my advocacy, my training. My master's degree is in social justice education. Um, so I am actually an OG social justice warrior, um, and have been, and I think the fire has burned in me for a long time, but it took a while for me to accept earth magic in terms of being structured and centered and rooted and grounded. And as I matured, I was able to contain my fire and my Ignis, my spark. And I realized that education was the place where, we could set a buffet table of options, educational events, classes. Sorry about that. Um, and education could be anything from a conference we attended or a workshop offered in a neighborhood. And I realized that the best way to preserve uh, paganism was to create uh, a religion whereby we could determine what one needed to accomplish or know or show in terms of proficiency in different areas, whether you are British traditional Wicca and Gardnerian, whether you practice Enochian or Thelemic magic, whether you are Dianic or Appalachian granny magic and folk magic, that there needed to be a way to put those into an educational setting so that our people could treat these institutions, whether they're virtual, digital, or brick and mortar, that what we hold now in terms of wisdom publication artifacts could be accessed by our people, and that education, I'm going to make draw a parallel between Temple Hecate, Altar of the Moon, which is the temple and seminary that we founded, two sister witches and myself founded exactly a year ago, in anticipation of our embroiled political culture right now. But if you create a religion and have a depository of information and classes and folk who could come in and do teaching or workshops, that a lot of information can be available for our people to access. And when I was writing out, I don't know if everyone is familiar with this process, but I know that we have circles and temples and sanctuaries and the like who have 501c3 tax exempt status with the federal government. And I've thought a lot about how I would discuss this issue. Because we want to have institutions of learning, whether that learning is something that is turned into a bachelor's degree of divinity or a master's of divinity or a doctorate of divinity, that we needed to have a different way of measuring what qualified as education, formal, informal, and the like. And when we filed our articles of incorporation, there was a section where you could attach your provisions for your organization. And it was that question, and I believe it was the 8th question. And I used that to attach all 30 of our articles for incorporation. And then I had a really profound and acute feeling that listing Temple Hecate, Altar of the Moon, as a 501c3 organization was not exactly safe. And I held off, and I have, all my documents here, and I withheld them. And it was only, I say 6 weeks ago, a month ago, that we heard on several news stations that this authoritarian regime was going to begin targeting 501c3 organizations to see who had been granted, as a church or organization, who had been granted tax exemption, because the regime that is currently in power took issue with community organizations, whether they're schools or temples, places of worship, if they were not right leaning, that they would be effectively chased down. And I didn't feel as though a safe idea to register. Think that leadership and other vested individuals get together. Um, that's in a Zoom meeting. I don't know if Zoom exists anymore, but Facebook um, meeting of the minds to determine exactly what we believed in the pagan and witch communities would qualify organizations to be um, acknowledged as an educational institution, what the parameters would be for granting degrees in our respective organizations. But I'm going to use the example of I was a vegetarian for 25 years. Part of that time was when I was living in California. And I remember, gosh, what year was that? I was around 2000. And there were standards by which food could be called organic. And there was California um, licensing for organic farming, and there was the Oregon TILF. I don't know if any of you remember that, but I remember when the federal government wanted to step in and have a say on what was labeled organic. I wanted nothing to do with that, and I didn't want California and Oregon standards to be dictated by the federal government. Same thing. I had several political misgivings about what the federal government, now the authoritarian regime, would classify as their benchmarks for pagan organizations and witchcraftian organizations. And I think that it's time, given the political climate that we're in is unsafe, to say the least. And I think it is more important for us to use this moment of chaos to pull out of the ether and up through the ground all of the pieces and best practices of pagan organization, into creating our own structures, um, by which we can gauge, pardon me, readjusting. Yes, Puff Girls t-shirt. I wanted to dress formally for this event. But I think it is critical for us as pagans and witches to define for ourselves, it's self-determinism, of course, you know, um, because I don't feel comfortable with our organizations having anything to do with the federal government. I don't think that it's safe. On my Facebook page, Gabriella Laughingbrook, it will be Gabriella Tebbins on Facebook, but in parentheses, it will say Laughingbrook on that page, as well as the Temple Hecate page Temple Hecate Altar of the Moon page. They both have what is called a switchboard, which is pagans and witch folk globally now. At this point, I didn't expect that at all. Giving our contact information to each other so that if it all fell down and the internet were not available to us, that we still had a way to contact each other in the event of something that drastic. Also, you will find on both the Temple Hecate Altar of the Moon Facebook page and Gabriella Tebbin's parentheses Laughingbrook page are all 30 of our articles for the temple in our charter document. And I tried to be as comprehensive as I could. And I was aware that I was writing a document with potential historical value and gravity. And the other sisters in the temple will agree that I spent probably 2 months refining and perfecting what I thought perfecting. It's a living document. It changed, but I realized what I had produced through my own practice and identity as a witch, as well as my professional acumen with being a curriculum writer, was that I created an all-encompassing and flexible education module that could potentially be shared nationally and internationally. And I'm a deconstructionist at heart. And what I mean by that is I think it's important for the wheel to be broken and examined, evaluated, and then there should happen a pluralistic dialogue about how to remake the wheel and or allow for a plasticity or an elasticity of an education model that is suitable for different traditions, different geographical locations. But I'll tell you what the outline looks like. If I can find it. Here it is. Okay. So the first article, and what I would like, let me just pause for a second. What I would like would be for those who are interested, for us to set a another date in a week or so where we can talk about questions and troubleshooting for this module. It's available on Facebook, but if folk want a hard copy, which I recommend printing it out, because I don't trust what's going to happen with our virtual / digital connectivity. I'm someone who is prepared for the worst, but really prefers the best. But just to give you an idea of what is included in Temple Hecate Altar of the Moon's articles, Article 1 is the charter statement. Article 2 is our reflection on the goddess. Article 3 is our desire to lead. Article 4 is our purpose. Article 5 is our inclusion policy. Article 6 is the mission of the temple. And I'm going to give you a taste of what those are. It's like giving you a teaser trailer to a movie, but I love it. I've had people read it and cry and want to get involved. There's actually a beautiful new little church slash temple happening in Arkansas from a sister witch who read our charter document and immediately wanted to be involved. She knows who she is. Shout out to Arkansas. Article 6, mission. Article 7 is the vision of Temple Hecate. Article 8 is our structure. Article 9 is the offices and duties. Article 10 is our meeting schedule. Article 11 is our membership. Article 12 is our one inviolable law. Article 13 is the temple support of women. Article 14 is to temple support of families. Article 14, hold please, I think I skipped Article 14. Article 14, yeah, temple support of families. Article 15 is what I call, or what we call, the Betty system, and I will explain that in a second. Article 16 is volunteerism and community service, which is a big part of Temple Hecate. Article 19 is community education outside of any of our degree programs. Article 20 is informal education and social committees, because our definition of what is education is elastic and flexible. Because it all, whether it appears to be a traditional mode of learning or which I think is insufficient, because learning can show up in a multitude of ways. Article 21, which is partnerships with between the temple and our community, as well as other pagan and witch organizations. Article 22 is Temple Hecate, Altar of the Moon, seminary faculty, and how we vet and involve other teachers to our program, to our temple. Article 23 is our 13 by 13 foundation education, which would translate roughly to gen ed requirements that folk might be familiar with in college, traditional mainstream college format. But I'll explain how the 13 by 13 foundation is different than gen ed's. Article 24 is our seminary program. Article 25 is our ministry program. Article 26 is our priestesshood program. Article 27 is the temple degree programs. Article 28 is the amendment process. Article 29 is our nonprofit tax status. And Article 30 is the temple vow to power, magic, self, and soul. So a cursory glance about our model is that Temple Hecate stands on 3 pillars. Those are spirituality, scholarship, and service. Okay, so what that means is that, and we welcome all traditions, all genders, all sexualities, all everything. We are absolutely inclusive. I may just go straight to our mission and vision statement so you all can get a flavor. I view my job as the founder and high priestess, which my formal title is Mistress of Stars. And our secretary, the other founding priestess, is Mistress of Whispers. She's effectively the secretary of the organization. And the third priestess is Mistress of Coin, which you'll recognize from a famous TV program. And she is our treasurer. And we stand on flexibility and truly deconstructing patriarchal systems of learning and college and classism and accessibility. I'm not having any of that. I'm over that. I think a lot of people are over that. And many of us are in debt because we were so bold as to want an education, which we were told at the time was required and needed. And a lot of folks were panic driven into college and higher education because they were told that without a college degree, you can't get a job, which is basically the capitalistic machine forcing a consumership, a commercialization that offends me deeply. So we have community curriculum. We have a training program for folk who want to minister from a place of witchcraftian and pagan values. Our priestesshood is officially the mystery schools of Eleusinian mystery between Persephone, Demeter, and Hecate. And those are closed lipped, and not a lot of detail is included in our charter document because I don't want our information to fall in hands and be weaponized against us. So a long time ago, I was called a doomsdayer and a conspiracy theorist. But look at that, Generation X. Here we are, still not trusting government with excellent reason. The wheel is broken. We stand in a moment where, as pagan and witch people, we can define what our declarations are, what our independence looks like, what our self determinism would look like in a formal educational um, context. And I feel best prepared when there's a pluralism of voices and perspectives and traditions. Um, let me get to let me what do we want? We want to look at, I'll just give you what our mission and vision is, which is Article 6 and 7. Okay. Article 6 of our charter document is our mission statement. And it says the mission of Temple Hecate, Altar of the Moon, is to inspire growth and connection between and within her members and allies through the provision of high quality opportunities to worship, learn, and commune together, and will actively seek ways to partner with other diverse communities so as to create a healthy network of within and far beyond the area of Huntersville, North Carolina, not knowing that it would go global almost immediately. Article 7 for Temple Hecate vision is the vision of Temple Hecate, Altar of the Moon, is that we will be renowned locally and nationally as a safe and storied gathering phenomenon where witches, pagans, heathens, and occultists and our allies can explore Hecate and her mythos into an age that prioritizes the power and beauty of the earth and her many, many peoples within and far beyond Temple Hecate, Altar of the Moon. We have a checks and balances of our own that includes the priesthood, the Council of Elders, and the Board of Directors. The Council of Elders counsels the triarchs, which is the three priestesses that lead the temple, on the content of classes and rituals. The board of directors advises us in terms of structure and the business end of running a temple and seminary. Let me talk about the 13 by 13 program, which is a flexible. So let me give you this. Every month, we offer a ritual on the full moon, on the Esbits. Every new moon, we offer a class. We also observe the Sabbats or the solar holidays during the month, if that happens. We have support groups called Bittersweet, and that's a women's support group. That happens every Friday. We have the Lunar Howling Society, which happens after ritual on the full moons. And that is basically a way for people to howl, and the other sisters and folks who attend the Lunar Howling Society. We don't always know why a sister or another practitioner will howl, but our job is to join our voices with theirs. It could be a beautiful reason, it could be a howl of frustration, it can be a howl of sorrow, and we will howl together as a people. So we have different community groups where people can explore the different values in a tradition as they translate to volunteerism and community service. For example, a battered women's shelter would be something that, appears in Hecate's mythos. Her story with Leto, which was another goddess. And there are, for example, Hecate is a veteran of two wars, the Gigantomachy and the Titanomachy. And folks don't realize that she is a veteran, but because she fought in those wars, the members of the temple can form a small committee or a large committee and do volunteerism with Veterans Association, and not necessarily Pagan and Witch veterans, but any veterans that want or need support, and we're willing to give it. Also, another example of a way that the community can get involved with Hecate's story, and there's an asterisk on Hecate, because I know there's a lot of question about whether or not all we do is Hecate, and it's not, because she is, she presides like Freya. She presides over all practices of magic. And so as we form faculty and curriculum, anyone from any tradition can donate a class, whether that's recorded, or if they're in town and they want to pop-up classes, just like there's pop-up vendors and those type of things. If one of my teaching faculty or folks that are involved with the temple happen to be in town, we can create an event or two, or however many we can fit into the weekend, so that people can meet one-on-one and build this camaraderie and just build the bonds between us. But so, for example, another popular committee has to do with Hecate being a chthonic god, or a goddess of the underworld. And that is doing cemetery, graveyard cleanup and beautification. Because there are folks who may not want to ritual with us. There may be folks who don't see themselves in attending a class, or prefers a different format, which we completely accommodate. Um, we have little bite sizes of involvement with the temple so that there is not this feeling of intimidation or feeling like they have to commit to a degree program. Um, there are bite sized pieces of volunteerism and community involvement that is completely self directed. Um, because as folks defrost in their small, their bite sized volunteerism in the committees, they may, after they feel comfortable, want to start attending community classes, or maybe they want to get involved with the ministry program. But the reason why I see this, why I see the temple in our charter as counterculture, is because it's a structure that is both, like I said, elastic when it comes to what type of curriculum folks want to create for it, but it can be flexible with respect to traditions that are practiced. Um, and it's a departure from traditional education, because if folks can't make the new moon class, which is something always different, um, folks can come to Huntersville and be put up locally, and I can, because I'm a curriculum writer, I can create classes, maybe 3 or 4 classes, so that folks can get their learning customized for them and what they want to learn. Say it's someone who's new in the community, they have their foundations, but they want to learn more about divination, or they want to learn more about a certain deity. Um, we are able to write a curriculum per their interests. The meeting times are flexible. Um, there is no model of learning in Temple Hecate that requires any type of, let's put it this way. We have effectively broken down the patriarchal structures of what learning looks like. So there is no, one lecturer in front of the room and everybody's in rows and they have to show up at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday or they don't get credit. Like, we are not about that. The What we uphold at Temple Hecate is that education about our lore and our history, our practices, our deities, our community, is that the temple and the education program is comprehensive in scope. Like I said, it is elastic. It can allow for different traditions, but the individual learner can be accommodated. Their the classes that they want are custom tailored to what they would like to learn. If they, for example, are someone that works 2 jobs, but they're only available for the third Thursday and Friday of the month, we we make learning possible for them at their level and their schedule, because what is most desirable is that we have as many learners um, out in the world. Um, we've hardened the target. Once someone has found themselves in their magic, and how they learn is honored, and they are given their history They are learning their lore. They are connecting concepts and practices to their own epiphanies and penchants. Not pensions, that's something completely different. But they are allowed to connect with themselves, their power, their magic, their history, their legacy, in a way that makes them really uh, resistant to being tamed. We are a wild and feral people. Who we are needs to be acknowledged and honored. Um, we deserve to have access to our history and our future. Um, and like I said, I broke the wheel in terms of education, and how education happens is flexible. How people want to participate is flexible. All different learning styles are honored in our charter document so that it can be different styles of learning, different traditions, like I said, and uh, the 13, the 13 by 13. So let me talk about that really quickly. The 13 by 13 means that our folks that are involved with the temple can choose or accumulate 13 different rituals, which I lead every full moon. And if they can come or they want to come, they do. If they don't, they can pick up another ritual the next month. So once 13 full moon rituals are accumulated and 13 different classes are attended, then I know that through 13 rituals and 13 classes that they have been exposed, or that sounds weird, exposed. They have been able to participate in a diversity of topics and the different ways that rituals can be created, um, how the different holidays can be observed. So from there, I sit down with each individual and we create a path for learning, and it's completely self-directed. Now, the way that I find,
Excuse me,
uh,
Gabriella.
yep,
I am so sorry, but we have another presentation in 3 minutes.
okay.
So,
So you want me to wrap up?
yes, because we can't
Okay.
run two lives at the same time. I am so
No, that's true.
sorry.
Okay. All right. So here's what I will say. Um, because teaching and explaining, I have portion control issues when it comes to sharing it. So if
It's
you are
been
interested, what's that?
amazing. It's been amazing.
Thank you. Anyway, get in contact with me on Facebook. Send me an email to templehecate@gmail.com or Gabriella Laughingbrook at gmail.com. So thank you again to the event organizers. I think it's really critical, and my love to my people.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom
Thank
with
you.
us. It's been amazing.
All right. Thank you very much. Talk to you